Trust is a fragile thing. It can take years to build and only seconds to shatter. I learned this lesson the hardest way possible, not through my own betrayal, but through discovering one that would unravel everything I thought I knew about friendship, loyalty, and the masks people wear. My name is Lauren Hayes, and this is the story of how a simple favor turned into a moral crisis that cost me everything I had in Austin, only to lead me somewhere I never expected. Sometimes the worst moments of our lives become the doorways to our greatest transformations, though we never see it coming until we're standing on the other side, looking back at who we used to be. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. It started on a Tuesday afternoon in late spring. The Texas heat was already oppressive, the kind that makes the air shimmer above the pavement and turns car interiors into ovens within minutes. I was wrapping up a campaign proposal at my desk when my phone buzzed with a message from Victoria Bennett, my best friend since college. Everyone called her Tori, and she'd been that constant presence in my life for the past 8 years. The kind of friend who knew your coffee order, remembered your parents' birthdays, and could make you laugh until your stomach hurt even on your worst days. The message was typical Tori, rapid fire and slightly frantic. She was heading to a destination bachelorette party in Cabo that her sister had planned, leaving in 3 hours, and she'd just realized she was supposed to respond to several potential wedding clients through her business Instagram. As a wedding event planner, her social media presence was her livelihood. Could I please log into her accounts and handle any inquiries? She'd leave her laptop at my apartment with all the passwords written down. Standard responses were fine. She trusted me completely. She'd owe me forever. Heart emoji, prayer hands emoji, champagne emoji. I agreed without hesitation. This was what friends did for each other. Besides, I worked in digital marketing, so managing her social media for a week seemed like a straightforward task. Tori dropped off her laptop during her frenzied pre-trip chaos, hugging me tightly and promising to bring me back something amazing from Mexico. Her perfume lingered in my apartment after she left, that expensive floral scent she always wore. I set the laptop on my coffee table and didn't think much about it for the rest of the day. The next morning, I opened Tori's laptop with my own coffee in hand, ready to tackle her Instagram messages with professional efficiency. She'd left detailed notes about which inquiries to prioritize, template responses for common questions, and her pricing structure. Everything was organized, color-coded, quintessentially Tori. I logged into her Instagram business account and immediately saw the red notification bubble indicating 37 unread messages. Most were exactly what I expected. Couples asking about availability for next summer, questions about package pricing, a few spam messages I deleted immediately. I worked through them methodically, copying and pasting Tori's templates with minor personalization. This was easy, almost meditative. Then I noticed she'd left another tab open on a different Instagram account, one I didn't recognize. The username was a random string of letters and numbers, clearly not her business profile. Curiosity nudged me toward that tab. Maybe it was a personal account she used for inspiration, or perhaps a backup profile. The moment I clicked over to it, I froze. This wasn't a backup account. This was a secret account, a carefully curated alternate identity that Tori had apparently been maintaining parallel to her real life. The profile picture was a stock photo of a sunset. No posts, just an avatar for communicating. And the DMs were extensive. My finger hovered over the trackpad. This felt wrong, invasive, crossing a boundary that friendship should respect. But she'd given me her laptop with everything logged in. She'd said to check her messages. Technically, these were her messages. The rationalization felt weak even as I made it, but I clicked into the DMs anyway, telling myself I'd just verify it was nothing important and then close it. The first conversation thread made my blood run cold. Messages between Tori and someone named Cassidy Moore stretched back nearly 6 months, filled with the kind of intimate familiarity that doesn't develop overnight. But these weren't friendly messages. They were flirtatious, explicit, detailing late-night phone calls and stolen moments during lunch breaks. Plans to meet up whenever Derek, Tori's fiancé, was traveling for work. Inside jokes and pet names. Photos I absolutely should not have seen. My hands started shaking. This couldn't be real. Tori was engaged to Derek Sullivan, a genuinely kind man who worked in corporate finance and had proposed to her on a sunset boat ride last autumn. Their wedding was scheduled for October, just 5 months away. I'd helped her pick out bridesmaid dresses. I'd attended her engagement party and toasted to their future. The save the dates were already mailed, featuring a photo of them laughing together, her left hand prominently displayed with that stunning oval diamond catching the light. I scrolled further back in the messages, hoping to find context that would make this less damning. Instead, I found more. Cassidy wasn't just some random affair. She was Tori's college girlfriend, the one she'd dated sophomore year before they broke up over what Tori had always described as incompatibility. Apparently, that incompatibility had resolved itself, because these messages detailed a passionate reconnection that had started last November, just weeks after Tori had gotten engaged. The messages painted a picture I didn't want to see. Tori complaining about Derek being boring, too predictable, too conventional. Cassidy encouraging her to call off the wedding, to be honest about who she really was. Tori responding that she couldn't, that her family would never understand, that her mother had already put deposits down on everything, that her entire social circle expected this wedding. The wedding planning business she'd built was predicated on the romance of marriage. How would it look if she couldn't even commit to her own? Then came the message that made my decision inevitable. It was from 2 days ago, sent late at night. Tori writing to Cassidy that the wedding was just a formality, something to satisfy her family and maintain her business image. Once she was married and had established herself further in Austin's wedding industry, she'd quietly divorce Derek in a year or two. He'd be fine. He'd move on. In the meantime, she and Cassidy could continue their relationship discreetly. Derek would never know. He was too trusting, too naive to suspect anything. The callousness of it stunned me. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a complicated emotional situation. This was calculated deception, a plan to use Derek as a prop in Tori's carefully constructed life while pursuing what she actually wanted in the shadows. And Derek had no idea. He was planning a future with someone who viewed him as temporary scaffolding, necessary for now but ultimately disposable. I sat there for 20 minutes, staring at the screen, my coffee growing cold beside me. Part of me wanted to close the laptop and pretend I'd never seen any of this. Tori was my best friend. We'd been through everything together, from college heartbreaks to career struggles to family drama. She'd held me when my father died unexpectedly 3 years ago, had stayed at the hospital with me and my brother Marcus through that awful night. She'd helped me move apartments twice, had talked me through my own relationship disasters, had been the person I called first with good news or bad. But Derek didn't deserve this. Derek, who'd once driven 2 hours in the middle of the night to jumpstart Tori's car when she was stranded. Derek, who patiently attended every wedding expo and tasting and planning session with genuine enthusiasm. Derek, who'd asked my advice on the proposal because he wanted it to be perfect for her. Derek, who was currently at work right now, probably thinking about honeymoon destinations or what color tie he should wear with his wedding suit, completely unaware that his entire future was a carefully orchestrated lie. I thought about calling Tori directly, confronting her in Mexico and demanding an explanation. But I knew her well enough to predict that conversation. She'd be defensive, would accuse me of violating her privacy, would spin some story about how I didn't understand the full context. She'd make it about my betrayal of our friendship rather than her betrayal of Derek. And she'd probably convince Cassidy to back up whatever version of events she decided to tell. Meanwhile, Derek would marry her in October, still clueless. The moral weight of what I knew pressed down on me like physical force. Some secrets aren't ours to keep, no matter how much we want to protect the people we love. Some betrayals are too significant to ignore. If I said nothing, I became complicit in Tori's deception. Every smile at the wedding, every congratulations I offered, would be a lie. I'd spend the reception watching Derek make vows he believed were mutual, knowing they were conditional and temporary from Tori's perspective. I couldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. I took screenshots of the most damning conversations, my hands still trembling. The evidence was clear and irrefutable. Then I found Derek's contact information in Tori's phone, which she'd also left logged into her laptop. His number was saved under a heart emoji, another small cruelty given what I now knew. I stared at those digits for a long time before finally opening a new message thread on my own phone. The message I composed was direct and simple. I identified myself, explained that Tori had asked me to manage her social media while she was in Mexico, and that I'd accidentally discovered something he needed to know about. I didn't include the screenshots in the initial message. I just asked if he could meet me for coffee that evening after he finished work. It felt important to tell him in person, to give him the respect of a face-to-face conversation rather than devastating him via text message. His response came 30 minutes later. Confusion was evident even through the brevity of his text. Was everything okay? Was Tori all right? I assured him she was physically fine, but that we needed to talk privately. He agreed to meet me at Copper Moon Cafe at 6 o'clock. The hours until that meeting stretched interminably. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I tried to work on my own projects but couldn't focus. I rehearsed what I'd say, how I'd present the information, how I'd handle his inevitable questions and pain. At 5:45, I drove to the cafe, arriving early enough to claim a quiet corner table away from the main flow of customers. The evening crowd was just starting to filter in, people stopping for post-work caffeine or meeting friends. The normalcy of it all felt surreal. All these people going about their regular lives while I was about to detonate someone's entire world. Derek arrived exactly on time, still wearing his work clothes, a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up and dress pants. He looked tired, probably from a long day of financial analysis and meetings. He spotted me immediately and walked over with a concerned expression, sliding into the chair across from mine. "Thank you for meeting me," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "I know this is strange, and I'm sorry to be cryptic. What I need to tell you is going to be difficult to hear." His concern deepened into worry. "Is Tori hurt? Did something happen in Mexico?" "No, she's fine physically." I took a breath, forcing myself to maintain eye contact. When Tori asked me to handle her social media while she was away, she left her laptop with me. Everything was logged in. While I was checking her business Instagram, I found another account. A private one. And the messages on that account showed something you need to know about. I watched his face as confusion shifted toward dread. He knew something bad was coming even if he didn't yet understand what. I pulled out my phone and opened the screenshots, turning the screen toward him. I didn't narrate or explain. The messages spoke for themselves with brutal clarity. Derek read in silence, his expression moving through denial, confusion, pain, and finally a kind of hollow shock. His hands gripped the phone tightly, knuckles whitening. He scrolled through the images slowly, thorough, making sure he understood completely. When he finally looked up at me, his eyes were wet though he hadn't let any tears fall. "How long have you known?" His voice was rough, barely controlled. "I found these this morning. I called you as soon as I processed what I was seeing." "I'm so sorry, Derek. I wish I didn't have to show you this, but you deserve to know before the wedding." He nodded slowly, still processing. "Does she know that you know?" "She's in Mexico. I haven't contacted her. You should be the one to decide how to handle this." We sat in heavy silence for several minutes. Around us, the cafe continued its normal operations. A barista called out drink orders. Someone laughed at a nearby table. The espresso machine hissed and gurgled. All of it felt distant, happening in some other dimension where hearts weren't breaking in corner booths. "Thank you for telling me," Derek said eventually. "I know this couldn't have been easy. You're her best friend." "That's exactly why I had to tell you," I replied. "Because I know her, and I know you. And what she's doing to you is wrong. You deserve better than being someone's convenient cover story." He studied my face for a moment. "This is going to cost you your friendship with her." "I know. But some things matter more than convenience. You're planning to build a life with her. You have a right to know who you're actually marrying. Derek left shortly after, taking the screenshots I'd forwarded to his phone. He looked like a man walking toward his own execution, shoulders slumped under the weight of knowledge he'd never asked for. I stayed at the cafe for another hour, nursing a coffee I didn't want, trying to process what I'd just done. The consequences arrived faster than I anticipated. Tori called me at 11 that night, her voice shaking with fury. Derek had apparently confronted her via phone call, waking her up in her Mexican resort hotel room. She'd immediately known the information came from me. How could you? She didn't bother with greetings or preamble. You went through my private messages? You violated my trust and destroyed my relationship. I kept my voice calm despite my racing heart. You gave me access to your laptop with everything logged in. You asked me to check your messages. And what I found wasn't something I could ignore. Derek deserved to know. That wasn't for you to decide. Her voice rose to near screaming. Those were private conversations. You had no right to share them with anyone. What I do in my personal life is none of your business. You made it my business when you asked me to access your accounts. And Derek's life is being built on a lie. Did you really expect me to stay quiet while you married him with every intention of divorcing him once it suited you? You don't understand the full situation. Tori's fury shifted slightly toward defensiveness. My relationship with Cassidy is complicated. My feelings for Derek are real. It's not as simple as you're making it. You literally wrote that the wedding is just a formality and you'd divorce him in a year. How is that complicated? That's just cruel. Silence stretched between us, filled with years of friendship dying in real time. When Tori spoke again, her voice had turned cold in a way I'd never heard directed at me. We're done, Lauren. After everything I've done for you, all the times I've been there, this is how you repay me? By sabotaging my life? I never want to speak to you again. You're dead to me. The line went silent. She'd hung up. I stared at my phone, expecting to feel regret or loss. Instead, I felt a strange clarity. Yes, I'd lost my best friend. But I'd also discovered she wasn't the person I thought she was. The Tori I'd loved and trusted for 8 years wouldn't have used someone the way she was using Derek. Maybe that version had never really existed. Maybe I'd been seeing what I wanted to see all along. The fallout spread through my social circle like wildfire through dry grass. Tori returned from Mexico 2 days early and immediately launched a campaign to control the narrative. Her version painted me as jealous, unhinged, someone who'd violated her privacy out of spite. She claimed I'd always been interested in Derek myself, that I'd manufactured evidence to break them up. Some of our mutual friends believed her. Rachel Kim stopped returning my calls. Others avoided choosing sides by simply distancing themselves from both of us. Derek canceled the wedding within a week. The announcement was brief and vague, citing irreconcilable differences and asking for privacy. Only those of us who knew the truth understood what that meant. Deposits were lost. Invitations were followed by cancellation notices. Tori's mother called me once, crying and furious, blaming me for destroying her daughter's happiness and embarrassing their entire family. My own life in Austin became increasingly untenable. Tori and I had intertwined social circles, favorite restaurants, mutual connections throughout the city. Everywhere I went, I risked running into people who'd heard her version of events, who viewed me as the villain in a story I'd never wanted to be part of. The judgment and whispers followed me constantly. My brother Marcus was supportive, but he lived in Seattle, too far away to provide daily comfort. I spent 2 weeks in a fog of second-guessing and isolation before the final straw broke. I'd gone to my favorite coffee shop, the one where I'd spent countless Saturday mornings working on campaigns and meeting with clients. As I waited in line, I overheard 2 women behind me talking in voices just loud enough to ensure I'd hear every word. They were discussing the drama, how that marketing girl had destroyed her best friend's wedding out of jealousy, how some people just couldn't stand to see others happy. One of them mentioned my name specifically, her tone dripping with contempt. I left without ordering, my face burning with humiliation. In my car, I sat gripping the steering wheel and made a decision that had been forming gradually over those difficult weeks. I couldn't stay in Austin anymore. Every street corner held memories of a friendship that had rotted from the inside. Every social event was a minefield of awkward encounters and judgmental stares. This city had become a prison of other people's opinions and my own disillusionment. That evening, I opened my laptop and began researching other cities with strong digital marketing industries. Somewhere I could start fresh, where nobody knew about Tori or Derek or the scandal that had consumed my life. Denver caught my attention almost immediately. It had a thriving tech scene, reasonable cost of living compared to coastal cities, and was far enough from Texas to feel like a genuine escape. The Rocky Mountains visible from downtown promised a kind of perspective I desperately needed. Marcus supported the decision when I called him, though I could hear concern beneath his encouragement. He offered his Seattle guest room as a temporary landing spot, but I declined. If I was going to rebuild my life, I needed to do it independently, not as someone's temporary house guest. I gave my landlord notice, started selling furniture I didn't want to transport across states, and updated my resume with a focus on the strategic thinking and campaign management skills I'd developed over 5 years in Austin's competitive market. The marketing agency where I worked wasn't sorry to see me go. The managing director had been friends with Helen Bennett, Tori's mother, and the entire office had become uncomfortable with my presence. They accepted my resignation with obvious relief and paid out my remaining vacation days. I packed my Honda Civic with everything essential, arranged for a moving company to ship the rest, and left Austin on a Wednesday morning in early June as the sun was just beginning to heat the highways. The drive to Denver took 13 hours with stops for gas and mediocre fast food. I listened to podcasts about starting over and reinvention, trying to frame this upheaval as an opportunity rather than exile. The landscape shifted gradually from Texas flatlands to the increasingly dramatic terrain of Colorado, the mountains rising in the distance like promises of elevation in every sense. By the time I reached Denver's outskirts, exhaustion had replaced anxiety with a kind of numb determination. I'd booked a modest extended-stay hotel in Capitol Hill for 2 weeks, giving myself that window to find an apartment and interview for positions. The neighborhood had character, a mix of historic homes converted to businesses, local restaurants, and young professionals like myself trying to build something. My hotel room was clean but impersonal, which felt appropriate. I was a blank slate now, undefined by past relationships or reputations. The first week was a blur of apartment viewings and job applications. I met with landlords who showed me overpriced studios with charming exposed brick and questionable plumbing. I submitted my portfolio to every digital marketing firm and tech startup I could find, customizing cover letters until the words blurred together. The rejections came quickly, polite emails thanking me for my interest but informing me they'd moved forward with other candidates. By day 8, my savings account balance was causing genuine anxiety and I still hadn't secured either housing or employment. The breakthrough came from an unexpected direction. I'd been sitting in a local coffee shop called the Alpine Table, nursing an overpriced latte while scanning job boards on my laptop. The cafe had become my temporary office, a place with decent Wi-Fi and enough background noise to prevent me from spiraling into catastrophic thinking. A man at the next table was having an increasingly frustrated phone conversation with someone about marketing analytics and campaign ROI metrics. From the fragments I could hear, whoever he was trying to hire either didn't understand the fundamentals or was explaining them poorly. When he ended the call with obvious irritation, I made a decision that surprised me. Normally I avoided inserting myself into strangers' conversations, but desperation makes us brave in uncomfortable ways. I leaned slightly toward his table and spoke before I could reconsider. "Excuse me, I'm sorry for eavesdropping, but I couldn't help overhearing your conversation. I work in digital marketing with a focus on analytics-driven campaign strategy. If you're hiring, I'd be interested in discussing the position." He looked up, startled, then assessed me with the rapid calculation of someone used to making quick decisions. He was probably in his early 30s, wearing a casual button-down and jeans, his laptop covered with startup company stickers. Dark hair, glasses that somehow made him look more approachable rather than nerdy, the kind of face that suggested both intelligence and humor. "You work in marketing?" He sounded skeptical but not dismissive. What's your background? 5 years at a boutique agency in Austin, primarily handling social media strategy and campaign analytics for local businesses and a few national clients. I specialize in turning data into actionable insights and measurable ROI improvement. I pulled up my portfolio on my laptop and turned the screen toward him, showing case studies with actual numbers and documented results. He studied the screen for several minutes, scrolling through my work samples with focused attention. I watched his expression shift from skepticism to interest. Finally, he looked up and extended his hand across the space between our tables. Nathan Pierce. I run a software development company called Streamline Software. We build project management tools for creative teams. I've been trying to hire a marketing lead for 3 months and everyone I've interviewed either doesn't understand B2B marketing or wants a salary I can't justify yet. Lauren Hayes. I shook his hand, feeling the first spark of hope I'd experienced since arriving in Denver. What's your timeline for hiring? Yesterday would be ideal, but I'll settle for as soon as possible. Our product is solid but nobody knows we exist. I need someone who can build our brand presence from basically nothing and drive qualified leads. The position pays less than you probably made in Austin, but there's equity and genuine growth potential if you can actually deliver results. His honesty was refreshing after weeks of corporate speak and vague job descriptions. We talked for another hour right there in the coffee shop, discussing his company's vision, target market, current marketing efforts which were essentially non-existent, and what success would look like in the first 6 months. Nathan's passion for his product was evident, and his willingness to admit what he didn't know about marketing suggested someone more interested in actual results than ego protection. Can you start Monday? He asked as our conversation wound down. I'll be honest, I'm taking a risk hiring someone I met in a coffee shop during an eavesdropping incident. But your portfolio speaks for itself and I'm desperate enough to trust my gut on this. I can start Monday, I confirmed, relief flooding through me. I just need to know the salary range to make sure I can survive while building your marketing program. The number he quoted was indeed lower than my Austin salary, but workable with careful budgeting. More importantly, it came with health insurance, equity options, and the kind of creative freedom I'd never had at my previous agency job where everything required approval from multiple directors. We exchanged contact information and he promised to send an official offer letter by the end of the day. Walking back to my hotel that evening, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. It wasn't just about securing employment, though that certainly helped. It was meeting someone who'd taken a chance on me based on competence rather than connections, who'd looked at my work rather than listening to gossip about my personal life. In Denver, I could be defined by what I could do rather than what I'd done to whom. The offer letter arrived in my inbox 3 hours later. Standard terms, everything we discussed, with a start date of Monday giving me exactly 4 days to find an apartment and move out of the extended stay hotel. I accepted immediately and then refocused on housing with renewed urgency. By Friday afternoon, I'd signed a lease on a 1-bedroom apartment in a building within walking distance of Streamline Software's office. The unit was small but had good light and came partially furnished, which saved me from having to wait for my shipped belongings to arrive. My first day at Streamline Software began with Nathan giving me a tour of their office space, a converted warehouse in a neighborhood undergoing rapid gentrification. The company consisted of 7 people including Nathan, all developers except for one part-time office manager who handled basic administrative tasks. They'd set up a desk for me in the corner near a window with a view of the street below, equipped with a new laptop and a whiteboard I'd specifically requested for brainstorming. Nathan introduced me to the team during their morning stand-up meeting, a daily ritual where everyone shared what they were working on. The developers were friendly but clearly skeptical about whether marketing would actually drive business results. I'd encountered this attitude before, the engineering mindset that assumed if you built something good enough, customers would simply appear. My job was to prove that visibility and strategic positioning mattered just as much as code quality. The first 2 weeks were intensive research and foundation building. I analyzed Streamline's competitors, studied their target market's behavior patterns, interviewed Nathan extensively about the product's unique advantages, and built a comprehensive marketing strategy from scratch. The plan included content marketing to establish thought leadership, targeted LinkedIn campaigns to reach decision makers, strategic partnerships with complementary tools, and a complete website redesigned to better communicate value propositions. Nathan gave me remarkable autonomy to execute my vision, trusting my expertise in ways my previous bosses never had. When I proposed blog content that would take significant time to produce, he approved it immediately. When I suggested attending an industry conference to network and understand customers better, he found room in the budget. This level of trust was both empowering and terrifying because failure would be entirely my responsibility. The work consumed me completely, which was exactly what I needed. 14-hour days became normal as I built campaigns, wrote content, designed graphics, and personally responded to every inquiry that came through our new lead generation system. I didn't have time to think about Austin or Tori or the life I'd left behind because I was too busy building something new. The loneliness I'd expected in a city where I knew nobody never materialized because I was rarely alone, always at the office or at coffee shops working on the next campaign or strategy iteration. Results came slowly at first, then accelerated. Our website traffic increased by 300% in the first month after the redesign and content strategy launch. Qualified leads started filling the pipeline, actual decision makers from companies that fit our ideal customer profile. By month 3, Nathan closed his first significant contract directly attributable to the marketing campaigns I'd built, an annual subscription from a mid-sized design agency that had found us through a blog post I'd written about project management challenges in creative industries. We celebrated that first major win with the whole team at a local brewery, everyone's skepticism about marketing's value finally cracking as they saw tangible results. Nathan proposed a toast specifically acknowledging my contributions, thanking me for taking a chance on his company when I could have gone somewhere more established. The recognition felt validating in ways I hadn't expected, confirmation that my skills had value independent of who I knew or what drama had preceded me. As summer shifted into autumn, my relationship with Nathan evolved beyond simple employer and employee. Late nights collaborating on strategy turned into conversations about our respective backgrounds and what had brought us to this point. He'd started Streamline after leaving a corporate software job that had slowly crushed his creativity with bureaucracy and politics. His father, a successful construction company owner, had wanted Nathan to join the family business and still considered software development frivolous compared to building physical structures. They maintained cordial but distant contact, each disappointed in the other's choices. I shared carefully edited versions of my own story, explaining I'd left Austin after a friendship had ended badly, that starting over in Denver had been both escape and opportunity. Nathan didn't press for details I wasn't ready to share, seemingly understanding that some wounds needed time before examination. Instead, he shared his own failures and setbacks with disarming honesty, the previous startup that had collapsed, the relationship that had ended when his girlfriend couldn't handle the uncertainty of dating an entrepreneur, the months of barely affording rent while building Streamline in the evenings after his day job. This gradual revelation of vulnerabilities created intimacy without the pressure of traditional dating. We were colleagues and friends first, united by shared purpose and complementary skills. The shift towards something more happened naturally over months rather than through any specific moment. A hand lingering on my shoulder during a stressful client call. His laugh at my jokes that weren't particularly funny. The way he'd save me the good coffee when I arrived late because he knew I preferred it to the office pot that tasted like burnt water. By November, 6 months into my tenure at Streamline, Nathan asked if I wanted to grab dinner after work at an actual restaurant rather than our usual takeout eaten at our desks. The invitation was casual, but something in his voice suggested significance beyond simple meal logistics. I agreed, telling myself this was just colleagues being friendly, nothing that required analysis or anxiety. The restaurant he chose was intimate without being overtly romantic, a small Italian place in our neighborhood known for homemade pasta and an impressive wine list. We sat across from each other in a corner booth and for the first few minutes maintained the pretense that this was a business dinner, discussing upcoming campaigns and product roadmap priorities. Then Nathan set down his menu and looked at me directly with an intensity one hadn't seen before. "I need to be honest with you about something," he began, his usual confidence wavering slightly. "These past 6 months working with you have been the best professional experience of my life. You've transformed our company in ways I didn't think were possible. But somewhere along the way, this stopped being just professional for me. I realized I look forward to seeing you every morning. I find excuses to stop by your desk. I think about you when I'm not at work, which is embarrassing to admit, but there it is. My heart raced as I processed his words, pleasure and panic arriving simultaneously. I'd been deliberately not examining my own feelings, too focused on rebuilding my life to risk complications. But his honesty demanded reciprocation, and I couldn't pretend I hadn't felt the same gravitational pull drawing us together. Nathan, I have to tell you something about why I left Austin. The full story, not the abbreviated version I've been giving people. Because if we're going to be anything more than colleagues, you deserve to know what you're getting into. Over dinner, I explained everything. Tori's betrayal, the DMs I discovered, Derek and the cancelled wedding, the social exile that had followed my decision to tell the truth. Nathan listened without interruption, his expression moving through surprise, anger on my behalf, and finally understanding. So you sacrificed a friendship and your entire social circle because you couldn't let an innocent person be manipulated, he summarized when I finished. That's not a character flaw, Lauren. That's integrity, even when integrity costs you everything. His immediate understanding of why I'd made the choice I had, without judgment or suggestion that I should have handled it differently, unlocked something inside me that had been tightly closed since leaving Texas. Here was someone who saw my actions as principled rather than betrayal, who understood that sometimes doing the right thing meant accepting painful consequences. I'm interested in more than a professional relationship with you, I admitted, allowing myself to be vulnerable in ways I'd avoided for months. But I'm also cautious because the last time I trusted completely, I discovered the person I thought I knew didn't actually exist. I need to move slowly. Slow is fine, Nathan assured me, reaching across the table to take my hand. I'm not interested in rushing anything. I just needed you to know where I stand, so we can figure out where we go from here with honesty rather than unstated assumptions. We left the restaurant that night as something undefined but promising, more than colleagues but not yet ready to label what we were becoming. The caution I'd expressed was genuine, but so was the hope beginning to bloom despite my wariness. Nathan represented something I hadn't expected to find in Denver, someone who valued the same things I did and was willing to build something slowly and intentionally rather than rushing toward predefined relationship milestones. Our courtship, if it could be called that, unfolded over the following months through late-night strategy sessions that turned into sharing childhood stories, lunch breaks that extended beyond professional necessity, weekend hiking trips in the mountains where we talked about everything except work. Nathan respected my boundaries without making me feel damaged for having them. When I wasn't ready to meet his family yet, he understood. When I needed space after a particularly difficult day, he gave it without taking offense. The balance between our professional and personal relationships required careful navigation. At the office, we maintained appropriate boundaries, focusing on work and treating each other as colleagues first. Outside those walls, we allowed ourselves to explore the connection growing between us. The team noticed but said nothing, perhaps recognizing that our partnership made the company stronger regardless of its personal dimensions. Streamline continued growing throughout the winter. The marketing programs I'd built generated consistent qualified leads, Nathan closed increasingly larger contracts, and we hired 3 more developers to handle the expanding workload. My equity stake, initially just numbers on paper, began representing actual value as the company's valuation increased with each funding conversation Nathan held with potential investors. More importantly, I'd found purpose in building something from near nothing, proving to myself that I could create success through competence rather than connections. By spring, a year after I'd fled Austin in my packed Honda Civic, I barely recognized the person I'd been. That heartbroken woman who'd discovered her best friend's betrayal felt like a character from someone else's story. I'd rebuilt not just my career but my understanding of what mattered, what I would accept, what I deserved. Denver had become home in ways Austin never truly had, perhaps because I'd chosen it rather than simply staying where I'd landed after college. Nathan and I had been officially dating for 4 months when he proposed an unexpected opportunity. A venture capital firm was interested in investing significant capital in Streamline, but part of their due diligence process involved meeting the leadership team. That included me as the marketing lead and partial owner. The meeting would require flying to their headquarters in Boston for a full-day presentation and Q&A session about our growth strategy, market positioning, and scalability plans. "This is huge," Nathan explained as we reviewed the proposal in his office. "This level of investment would let us expand nationally, hire a full team, maybe even acquire some complementary products to build a more comprehensive platform. But they want to see that we're not just a one-person show, that the leadership extends beyond me. Your marketing strategy is a significant part of why they're interested. They specifically mentioned your content marketing approach and customer acquisition metrics in their preliminary assessment. The presentation took 2 weeks to prepare, every detail refined and rehearsed until we could deliver it confidently under pressure. Nathan focused on product vision and technical capabilities while I built the case for our market opportunity and demonstrated the repeatable systems I'd created for customer acquisition. We practiced in front of Streamline's entire team, incorporating their feedback and tough questions to strengthen our responses. The actual meeting in Boston exceeded expectations. The venture capital partners asked sharp questions but seemed genuinely impressed by both the product and our strategic approach. They particularly focused on the scalability of our marketing systems, whether what I'd built could be replicated and expanded with additional team members or if it depended entirely on my personal execution. I'd anticipated this concern and had documentation ready showing the frameworks, templates, and processes that would allow others to execute the strategy I'd designed. We flew back to Denver cautiously optimistic, knowing the final decision would take weeks as they completed their full due diligence. In the meantime, life continued with familiar rhythms. I worked on campaigns, Nathan coded and managed the development team, and we stole moments together between meetings and deadlines. The possibility of major investment hung over everything, promising transformation if it came through but also requiring us to continue as if it might not. The call came on a Thursday afternoon in April. Nathan answered on speaker in his office with me present, both of us holding our breath as the venture capital partner delivered their decision. They were offering the full investment amount we'd requested, at terms Nathan quickly confirmed were favorable. The investment transformed Streamline overnight from a scrappy startup into a legitimately funded company with resources to match Nathan's ambitions. We moved into a proper office space with room for the team we'd soon be hiring, upgraded our technology infrastructure, and most significantly for me, I finally had a real marketing budget instead of cobbling together campaigns with creativity and minimal spending. Nathan offered me the formal title of Chief Marketing Officer, acknowledging that my role had evolved far beyond what we'd originally discussed in that coffee shop nearly a year ago. The expansion phase tested both our professional partnership and personal relationship in ways neither of us anticipated. Suddenly we were hiring a marketing team that would report to me, interviewing candidates who had more traditional credentials and experience than I'd possessed when Nathan took a chance on me. The imposter syndrome hit hard during those early interviews, watching people with prestigious agency backgrounds and impressive client lists explain why they wanted to work for a company I'd helped build from nothing. Nathan sensed my insecurity during a particularly difficult hiring day when I'd interviewed 3 candidates who all seemed more qualified than me on paper. He found me in my office after hours, staring at resumes and questioning whether I was the right person to lead this expanded team. Without saying anything, he pulled up our analytics dashboard showing the growth trajectory I'd created, the customer acquisition costs I'd driven down systematically, the brand awareness metrics that had climbed steadily month after month. "These numbers don't lie," he said simply. "You built this from zero. Those candidates you interviewed have experience, sure, but they've never had to create something from nothing the way you did. They've never had to make every dollar count the way we had to. That's the perspective our team needs, someone who understands growth at every stage, not just when resources are unlimited." His confidence bolstered mine enough to continue the hiring process with clearer criteria. I wasn't looking for the most impressive credentials. I was looking for people who combined competence with humility, who could execute within established systems while also challenging those systems to improve. By June, I'd built a team of 4 people who brought complementary skills in content creation, paid advertising, analytics, and social media management. Training them on our processes and philosophy became my new focus, transitioning from doing everything myself to enabling others to execute the vision. The shift from individual contributor to manager forced me to develop skills I'd never needed before. Delegating tasks I'd always handled personally required trust that others would maintain the quality standards I'd established. Providing feedback, both positive and constructive, demanded emotional intelligence I'd had to cultivate deliberately. Managing different personalities and work styles while maintaining team cohesion turned out to be far more complex than managing campaigns. Some days I missed the simplicity of just executing the work myself rather than coordinating others to do it. Nathan faced similar challenges as Streamline's development team expanded from the original tight-knit group to a larger organization with multiple projects running simultaneously. We'd spend evenings at his apartment or mine, comparing notes on management challenges and laughing at the absurdity of suddenly being responsible for teams when we'd both been individual contributors just months earlier. These conversations deepened our relationship in unexpected ways, building partnership based on shared growth rather than static compatibility. Our personal relationship had settled into comfortable rhythms by this point. Nathan kept a change of clothes at my apartment and I had essentials at his place. We'd established weekend routines involving farmers market visits and hiking trails, discovered shared preferences for obscure documentaries and spicy food that made us both suffer pleasantly. His friend group had absorbed me gradually, and I'd built my own circle in Denver independent of him, deliberately creating a life that didn't depend entirely on our relationship. The topic of marriage surfaced naturally rather than through dramatic proposal moments. We were assembling furniture for Nathan's new apartment, a place he'd moved to after deciding his studio no longer fit his life, and I'd made some comment about how he should consider resale value when choosing paint colors. He'd stopped mid-hammer swing and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Are you planning to be around to care about my resale value?" The question was light but carried real weight underneath. "I'd like to be," I admitted, setting down the instruction manual. "If you're asking what I think you're asking. I'm asking if you'd consider making this more permanent. Not right now necessarily, but eventually. Because I can't imagine building a future that doesn't include you in it." We talked for hours that afternoon, the furniture forgotten as we discussed what marriage would mean to us, what we wanted it to look like, how we'd navigate combining our lives even more fully than we already had. Both of us were wary of traditional relationship scripts, more interested in partnership that served both people than adhering to expectations about how things should progress. By the time we finished talking, we'd agreed that yes, marriage made sense, though we'd skipped the elaborate wedding neither of us wanted in favor of something simple and authentic. The actual proposal came 2 months later during a camping trip in Rocky Mountain National Park. We'd hiked to a remote lake, just the two of us and miles of wilderness, and Nathan had simply asked while we were cooking dinner over our camp stove if I wanted to make our partnership official. "No ring yet," he'd admitted, because he wanted us to choose it together rather than guessing what I'd like. The practicality of it was perfectly us, less concerned with romantic gestures than with making decisions collaboratively. We married in early September at the courthouse with just a handful of people present. Marcus flew in from Seattle, clearly relieved that I'd found someone who treated me as an equal. Nathan's business partner Stephen attended, along with 2 colleagues from Streamline who'd become genuine friends. We wore nice clothes but nothing that could be called wedding attire, exchanged rings we'd selected together, and made straightforward promises about partnership and mutual support. Afterward, we had dinner at the Alpine Table, the coffee shop where we'd met, which the owner had agreed to close early so we could have a private celebration. The simplicity of it felt right, authentic to who we'd become individually and together. No elaborate ceremony that prioritized appearance over substance. No family drama or obligation to include people who didn't genuinely support us. Just the beginning of officially recognized partnership with someone who saw me clearly and chose me anyway, who I saw just as clearly and chose with equal certainty. Streamline's continued growth demanded increasing amounts of attention from both of us as autumn progressed. The investment had brought not just resources but expectations for rapid scaling and market expansion. Nathan was in constant conversations with the venture capital partners about strategic direction while managing a development team that had grown to 15 people. My marketing team had expanded to 7 as we pushed into new markets and developed more sophisticated campaigns. The comfortable early days when we knew everyone's name and could make decisions quickly had evolved into an actual company with processes, hierarchy, and complexity. We were preparing for our largest initiative yet, a complete platform rebrand and repositioning to appeal to enterprise customers rather than just the small to mid-size companies we'd focused on initially. This required research, strategy development, new messaging, updated visual identity, and coordinated launches across multiple channels. The project consumed months of planning and represented a significant bet on our ability to move upmarket successfully. I was deep in rebrand planning one afternoon when my phone rang with an unknown Texas number. I almost didn't answer, assuming it was spam, but something made me pick up. The voice on the other end was one I hadn't heard in nearly 2 years. Lauren? It's Derek. Derek Sullivan. I hope it's okay that I'm calling. I got your number from Marcus. I wanted to reach out. The shock of hearing from him rendered me temporarily speechless. Derek, my former friend's ex-fiancé, the man whose wedding I'd helped cancel by revealing the truth. Why would he be calling me after all this time? What could he possibly want? I know this is unexpected, he continued, filling my silence. I'd been wanting to contact you for a while but wasn't sure if it would be welcome. I wanted to thank you properly for what you did, even though I'm sure it didn't feel like you were doing me any favors at the time. How are you? I managed, my mind racing through implications and concerns about where this conversation might lead. I'm good actually. Better than I've been in years. After everything fell apart with Tori, I did a lot of therapy and self-reflection. I realized I'd been settling for a relationship that looked good on paper but didn't actually fulfill me. I'm seeing someone now who's amazing, and more importantly, I'm with her for the right reasons. He paused before continuing. But the real reason I'm calling is that I'm in Denver for a finance conference next week, and I wondered if you'd be willing to meet for coffee. There are some things I'd like to say in person if you're open to it. My first instinct was to decline, to keep that entire chapter of my life firmly closed. But curiosity won out, along with a kind of closure hunger I hadn't realized I was still carrying. We agreed to meet at a neutral coffee shop near the convention center where his conference was being held. I didn't mention the call to Nathan immediately, not out of secrecy but because I wanted to process what it might mean before discussing it. When I did tell him that evening over dinner, Nathan's response was characteristically measured. He asked if I wanted him to come with me to the meeting, respected my decision to go alone, and simply requested that I text him when it was over so he'd know I was okay. His trust without possessiveness reminded me again why our relationship worked where others hadn't. The coffee shop meeting happened on a Tuesday morning before work. I arrived early, watching through the window as Derek approached, and was struck by how different he looked. The strained exhaustion I remembered from our last encounter had been replaced by someone who seemed comfortable in his own skin. He'd grown a beard, looked like he'd been spending time outdoors, carried himself with quiet confidence rather than the eager-to-please energy that had defined him during his relationship with Tori. We ordered coffee and found a table away from the morning rush crowd. The initial awkwardness dissolved quickly as Derek explained why he'd wanted this meeting. He'd spent the past 2 years working through the betrayal and his own role and missing obvious signs that the relationship was wrong. Therapy had helped him understand he'd been performing a version of commitment rather than actually being committed, choosing Tori because she fit what he thought his life should look like rather than who he actually was. I need you to know that what you did, telling me the truth even though it cost you everything, that was one of the kindest acts anyone has ever done for me, he said earnestly. At the time, I was devastated. But if you hadn't shown me those messages, would have married her. I would have built a life on foundations that were completely false. You saved me from years of misery, even though you paid the price for it. His gratitude was sincere and surprisingly healing. I'd carried guilt about my role in destroying his relationship, questioning whether I'd had the right to make that choice for him. Hearing him confirm that yes, he was grateful, that the short-term pain had led to long-term growth, provided validation I hadn't known I needed. We talked for over an hour, updating each other on our lives. Derek had left Austin 6 months after the canceled wedding, moved to Houston for a fresh start similar to mine. He was engaged now to someone he'd met through mutual friends, a relationship he described as easy in the best possible way, built on honesty and shared values. He seemed genuinely happy in a way I didn't remember seeing during his time with Tori. Before we parted, Derek asked the question I'd been half expecting. Have you heard anything about Tori? What happened to her after everything fell apart? I admitted I hadn't followed her story deliberately, had blocked her on all social media and asked mutual friends not to update me. Derek hesitated, then shared what he knew from acquaintances still in Austin. Tori's event planning business had struggled after the wedding cancellation, with several clients pulling out once word spread about why the wedding had been called off. Her relationship with Cassidy had lasted only a few months after everything became public, apparently unable to survive the scrutiny they'd previously avoided. Last Derek had heard, Tori had moved to Dallas and was working for a corporate event planning firm rather than running her own business. The information sat heavy between us. Neither of us took satisfaction in her struggles, though we both recognized a certain karmic justice in how things had unfolded. Derek had found happiness built on authenticity. I'd built a life and career I was proud of. Tori had gotten what she schemed for, the freedom to be with Cassidy, only to discover that relationships built on betrayal rarely survived exposure to daylight. We exchanged contact information before parting, promising to stay in occasional touch, though both understanding this would likely be sporadic at best. His presence in my life had served its purpose, providing closure and confirmation that the choice I'd made, as costly as it had been, was ultimately right. Walking back to my office after that meeting, I felt lighter, as though I'd set down a weight I'd been carrying without realizing its presence. The rebrand launch consumed the next 2 months. My team executed flawlessly, coordinating press releases, social media campaigns, email sequences, and partnership announcements with precision timing. Nathan's team delivered product updates that matched our new positioning. The result exceeded our projections, with enterprise inquiries increasing dramatically and our average contract value jumping significantly as we attracted larger customers. The venture capital partners were thrilled, already discussing potential Series B funding to accelerate growth further. Streamline's success attracted industry attention, including invitations to speak at conferences about our growth strategy and marketing approach. Nathan and I were asked to present together at a major tech conference in Austin, of all places, about building scalable companies through aligned product and marketing vision. The irony of returning to the city I'd fled as a professional success wasn't lost on either of us. "I have no interest in going if it's going to dredge up painful memories," Nathan told me when the invitation arrived. "We can decline and present somewhere else." But something about the opportunity appealed to me. Returning to Austin not as someone fleeing judgment but as a recognized professional, presenting about success I'd built through competence, felt like reclaiming something that had been taken from me. I wanted to walk through that city as Lauren Hayes, the CMO, not Lauren, the friendship betrayer. We accepted the invitation. The conference organizers were thrilled and promoted our session heavily in their marketing materials. As the date approached, I found myself more excited than anxious. This wasn't about proving anything to Tori or former friends who judged me. This was about demonstrating to myself that I'd moved beyond that chapter entirely, that I could exist in Austin as someone defined by accomplishment rather than scandal. The conference was scheduled for late November at a downtown hotel I'd passed countless times during my years living in the city. Nathan and I flew in the day before, checking into the conference hotel and rehearsing our presentation one final time. The content was solid, a mix of strategic insights and specific tactics that had driven Streamline's growth, with clear delineation of how product and marketing alignment created compound advantages. We'd presented versions of this content before at smaller venues, but this conference was significantly larger with an audience of industry leaders and potential customers. The morning of our presentation, I dressed carefully in professional clothes that projected confidence without trying too hard. Nathan wore his standard conference outfit, nice jeans and a blazer over a button-down that split the difference between casual and formal. We arrived at the conference venue early, testing our slides and audio, making sure the technical elements would function smoothly. The room filled quickly, more attendees than the standard session capacity, with people standing along the back wall when seats ran out. The conference organizers looked pleased with the turnout. Nathan and I exchanged a quick look before stepping onto the small stage, and then we launched into our presentation with the practiced rhythm of people who'd worked together long enough to anticipate each other's timing. The content resonated based on audience reaction. People took notes, nodded at key points, laughed at the occasional humor we'd built into the presentation. During the Q&A section, questions were thoughtful and engaged rather than hostile or skeptical. We answered collaboratively, building on each other's responses and demonstrating the partnership we'd been describing. The session ended with genuine applause and a small crowd forming afterward with follow-up questions and business card exchanges. I was talking with a potential enterprise customer about their marketing challenges when I saw her across the room. Tori stood near the doorway, clearly having attended the session, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. She looked different, thinner and more severe, her signature warmth replaced by something harder. Our eyes met for a brief moment before she turned and left quickly, disappearing into the conference crowd before I could decide whether to acknowledge her presence. Nathan noticed my distraction and followed my gaze. "Was that her?" he asked quietly, angling his body slightly to shield me from view of anyone else. "Yeah, that was Tori." I took a breath, steadying myself against the surge of complicated emotions. She must have seen our names in the conference program. "Do you want to leave?" he offered immediately. "We can skip the networking reception and just head to the airport." But I didn't want to leave. Seeing Tori, witnessing her witness my success, provided a kind of closure the Derek conversation had only partially achieved. She'd seen me not just surviving but thriving, professionally accomplished and personally partnered with someone who treated me as an equal. More importantly, I'd seen her alone, diminished, watching from the sidelines rather than commanding the room the way she once would have. "No, I want to stay for the reception," I decided. "We earned the right to be here. I'm not leaving because she showed up." The networking reception that evening was held in the hotel's rooftop space with views of Austin's skyline lit up against the November darkness. Nathan and I worked the room together, talking with conference attendees about streamline and making connections that would likely turn into business opportunities. Several people specifically sought us out to continue conversations from our presentation, praising both our content and our obvious collaborative dynamic. I didn't see Tori again that evening, though I remained peripherally aware of the possibility. If she was there, she kept her distance, and I was content to let that silence stand. Whatever needed to be said between us had already been communicated through actions rather than words. She destroyed a friendship through calculated betrayal. I'd rebuilt a life that proved her assessment of me as weak or limited was fundamentally wrong. Those were the facts that mattered, requiring no additional conversation. We flew back to Denver the following morning, both energized by the conference success and the business opportunities it had generated. The Austin trip had accomplished what I'd hoped, proving I could return to that city as someone whole and successful rather than broken and exiled. More than that, it had demonstrated how completely I'd moved beyond needing validation from people who'd once defined my social world. Tori's appearance and quick departure felt less like an encounter with someone who still held power over me and more like a footnote to a story that had already reached its conclusion. December brought the kind of momentum that made exhaustion feel worthwhile. 3 enterprise contracts closed directly from connections made at the Austin conference, validating the time and energy we'd invested in building Streamline's brand visibility. My marketing team was operating smoothly, executing campaigns with minimal oversight from me, allowing me to focus on higher-level strategy and the leadership responsibilities that came with the CMO title. Nathan was in active discussions with the venture capital partners about accelerating our growth timeline, potentially pursuing acquisition targets that would expand our product capabilities. The holidays arrived with welcome slowness after months of relentless professional intensity. Streamline shut down for a full week between Christmas and New Year, something Nathan had insisted on despite pressure from investors to maintain momentum. His reasoning was sound and reflected the values that had drawn me to work with him in the first place. Sustainable growth required sustainable people, and sustainable people needed rest. Burning out the team for short-term gains would ultimately cost us more than a week's lost productivity. Nathan and I spent Christmas in Seattle with my brother Marcus and his wife, the first time I'd been able to visit them since moving to Denver. Marcus had met Nathan briefly at our courthouse wedding but wanted real time to assess whether my husband was actually the partner I claimed or if I was minimizing problems the way people in struggling relationships often did. By the second day, I could see Marcus's protective concern relaxing as he watched Nathan and me navigate his household routines, collaborate on cooking, and maintain the easy partnership that defined our marriage. "You seem genuinely happy," Marcus observed during a rare moment alone while Nathan was out running errands with Marcus's wife. "Not performing happiness or convincing yourself you should be happy, but actually content." "I am happy," I confirmed, meaning it fully. Nathan and I work because we built something together before becoming romantic. We know how to be partners in the practical sense, not just the emotional one. And he's never tried to change me or mold me into some version he thinks I should be. "That's what worried me about the Tori situation back then," Marcus admitted. "Not just that she betrayed you, but that you'd seem to constantly be adjusting yourself to fit what she needed rather than being accepted as you were. I'm glad you found someone who doesn't require that. His observation clarified something I'd felt but hadn't articulated. My friendship with Tori had involved constant calibration, making myself smaller or different to accommodate her needs and preferences. I'd convinced myself that was what friendship required, that love meant self-adjustment. Nathan had shown me a different model entirely, one where I could be fully myself and be valued for exactly that, where my quirks and preferences and opinions were appreciated rather than tolerated. New Year's Eve found us back in Denver at a small gathering with the Streamline core team and their partners. We'd rented out a private room at a local restaurant, nothing elaborate but comfortable and warm. As midnight approached, I found myself reflecting on how dramatically different this new year felt compared to the one 2 years earlier, when I'd been newly arrived in Denver, uncertain about everything, carrying wounds that still ached daily. Nathan found me on the restaurant's small patio where I'd stepped out for air and perspective. The Colorado winter was sharp and clear, the kind of cold that felt cleansing rather than punishing. He draped his jacket over my shoulders without speaking, just standing beside me as we watched the city lights spread below us. "Thinking about how far you've come?" he asked after a comfortable silence. "Thinking about how none of this was what I planned, but it's better than anything I could have planned. 2 years ago I was running away from humiliation and betrayal. Now I'm standing here with a career I'm proud of, a company I helped build, and a partner who makes me better without making me smaller." He pulled me closer against the cold. "You know what I've learned from watching you rebuild? That sometimes our greatest strengths emerge from surviving our worst moments. You could have let what happened in Austin break you permanently. Instead, you used it as fuel to become someone stronger." His words echoed something I'd been processing privately. The person I'd been in Austin, seeking approval and adjusting myself constantly to maintain relationships, probably wouldn't have succeeded at Streamline. That version of me lacked the confidence to make bold marketing decisions, to trust my instincts when they conflicted with conventional wisdom, to build and lead a team with clear vision. Tori's betrayal had been devastating, but it had also freed me from patterns that were limiting my potential. The restaurant door opened behind us and Stephen called out that midnight was approaching. We rejoined the group, accepted champagne glasses, and counted down the final seconds of the year. As the clock struck 12 and everyone erupted in cheers and embraces, Nathan kissed me with the kind of certainty that made the future feel solid rather than frightening. Whatever came next, we'd face it as partners, building on foundations we'd established through shared work and mutual respect. January brought the opportunity I'd been working toward without fully realizing it was my goal. Nathan received an acquisition offer from a major enterprise software company interested in integrating Streamline's platform into their existing product suite. The terms were extraordinary, valuing our company well beyond even optimistic projections. The offer included retaining both Nathan and me in leadership positions for the combined entity, with Nathan overseeing the integrated product development and me leading marketing for the expanded division. We spent a week analyzing the offer from every angle, consulting with the venture capital partners who had minority ownership stakes, modeling out the financial implications, and most importantly, discussing what acceptance would mean for our lives and relationship. This wasn't just a business decision. This was potentially changing the entire trajectory we'd been building, trading entrepreneurial independence for corporate structure and resources. The financial security the acquisition offered was undeniable. The equity we'd been building would convert to actual wealth, enough to eliminate any stress about money for the foreseeable future. But Nathan's hesitation was evident despite the attractive terms. He'd left corporate software specifically to build something of his own, and accepting this offer meant returning to that world, even in a leadership role. "What do you want to do?" I asked him during one of our many discussions about the offer. "Not what makes financial sense or what the investors want, but what feels right to you." He was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window of our apartment at the mountains visible in the distance. "I want to accept it," he admitted finally. "I thought I'd resist the idea of going back to corporate structure, but this is different. We'd be integrating our product into something much larger, reaching customers we'd never access on our own. And critically, we'd be doing it together, with the partnership we've built intact. That matters more than maintaining pure entrepreneurial independence." His reasoning aligned with my own thinking. The acquisition represented growth and impact rather than surrender. We'd have resources to build marketing programs at a scale I'd only imagined, access to distribution channels that would have taken years to develop independently, and the security to take creative risks without fearing they'd bankrupt the company. Most importantly, the offer preserved our partnership and valued both of our contributions equally. We accepted the acquisition in early February. The announcement generated significant industry attention, with several publications covering the deal and interviewing Nathan and me about our growth strategy and what came next. My former colleagues from Austin reached out with congratulations, their messages carefully neutral but clearly surprised by how successful I'd become after leaving Texas under a cloud of social disapproval. I responded politely but briefly, maintaining boundaries that felt appropriate for relationships that had proven shallow under pressure. The integration process consumed the next several months as Streamline's team merged with the acquiring company's existing marketing and development organizations. I found myself leading a team of 30 rather than 7, with budget authority and strategic influence I'd never had as a startup CMO. The transition had inevitable challenges, merging different cultures and approaches, but the acquiring company had been smart enough to largely preserve what made Streamline successful rather than immediately imposing their existing processes. Nathan thrived in his expanded role, energized by the technical resources and talented developers now available to accelerate product development. We maintained our practice of discussing work challenges over dinner, helping each other navigate the politics and complexities of a much larger organization. The corporate environment brought stresses different from startup uncertainty, but our partnership adapted, continuing to provide the mutual support that had characterized our relationship from the beginning. By summer, life had settled into new rhythms that felt stable in the best possible way. My work was challenging but manageable, Nathan's product vision was being realized with resources we'd never had independently, and our marriage had deepened through successfully navigating major professional transitions together. We'd purchased a house in a neighborhood we loved, were planning a long-delayed proper honeymoon to New Zealand, and had begun discussing the possibility of starting a family once things stabilized further. The final piece of closure arrived unexpectedly on a Tuesday afternoon in July. I was reviewing campaign performance reports when my phone rang with another Austin number I didn't recognize. My first instinct was to ignore it, assuming it was spam or someone from my past I had no interest in reconnecting with. But something made me answer, perhaps curiosity or perhaps just the confidence that came from knowing I was secure enough to handle whatever the call might bring. Lauren? This is Helen Bennett, Tori's mother. I hope you'll give me a moment before you hang up. Her voice brought a rush of complicated memories. Helen had been kind to me during my friendship with Tori, treating me like a second daughter, which had made her furious call after Derek canceled the wedding particularly painful. I'd been certain she hated me for destroying her daughter's plans and embarrassing their family. Whatever had prompted her to reach out after more than 2 years, it clearly required courage. I'm listening, I said carefully, my tone neutral rather than welcoming or hostile. I owe you an apology. A real one, not the kind people give to ease their own conscience. Helen's voice was steady but heavy with emotion. When everything happened with Tori and Derek, I blamed you entirely. I said terrible things about you to anyone who would listen. I convinced myself you'd sabotage my daughter out of jealousy or malice. I'm calling because I've since learned the full truth, and I was completely wrong about you and about Tori. She explained that Derek had contacted her several months earlier, wanting to clear the air before his upcoming wedding to his new fiancée. During that conversation, he'd shared the full story including the actual content of the messages I'd discovered, details Tori had never revealed to her family. Helen had confronted Tori, who'd eventually admitted everything, the affair with Cassidy, the plan to use Derek as convenient cover, the calculated deception. Learning what she'd actually done, how she'd manipulated Derek and lied to all of us, that changed everything I thought I understood, Helen continued. You weren't destroying her happiness. You were preventing her from destroying an innocent person's life. I spent months defending her and vilifying you, and I'm deeply sorry for that. You showed more integrity than anyone in our family did. Her apology was genuine, devoid of the defensiveness or justifications that often accompany admissions of wrongdoing. I accepted it with grace, acknowledging that she'd been operating with incomplete information and maternal instinct to protect her daughter. We talked for nearly an hour, Helen sharing what had happened in Tori's life since I'd last had contact with her. The event planning business had indeed collapsed after the wedding cancellation scandal. Tori had struggled financially and emotionally, eventually moving to Dallas as I'd heard from Derek. The relationship with Cassidy had imploded spectacularly once they could no longer sustain the excitement of secrecy. Tori was currently working in corporate event planning but by all accounts was miserable, trapped in a job she found unfulfilling with no clear path back to the independence she'd once had. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel sorry for her," Helen clarified. "I'm sharing it because you deserve to know that the choices she made had consequences, that what you tried to prevent, the destruction caused by her deception, eventually caught up with her anyway. You tried to minimize the damage. She maximized it through denial and continued lying. How is she doing now?" I asked, surprising myself with the question. Despite everything, I couldn't completely extinguish the concern that came from years of genuine friendship before discovering who Tori actually was. "She's surviving, but I wouldn't say she's thriving." Helen's honesty was refreshing. "She's in therapy finally, working through why she felt she needed to deceive everyone rather than just living authentically from the start. I think she's carrying a lot of regret about how she handled things, particularly regarding you. She's never said so directly, but I believe losing your friendship was one of the real costs she didn't anticipate." The conversation ended with Helen thanking me again for listening and for accepting her apology. She didn't ask me to contact Tori or suggest reconciliation, seemingly understanding that some damages were permanent regardless of apologies. After we hung up, I sat quietly for a while, processing the information and my own response to it. I felt no satisfaction in learning about Tori's struggles, no sense of vindication or karma being served. Mostly I felt a kind of sad acceptance that the person I'd considered my best friend had never actually existed. The Tori I'd loved had been a performance, carefully constructed to maintain approval and advantage. The real Tori, the one who'd calculated how to use Derek and manipulate everyone around her, was someone I'd never actually known. That evening, I shared the conversation with Nathan over dinner on our back patio. He listened carefully, asked thoughtful questions, and then offered an observation that crystallized my own thinking. "It sounds like you've reached genuine peace about it," he said. "Not the forced peace of trying to move on, but actual resolution. You can hear about her struggles without needing them to validate your choices, and you can accept her mother's apology without feeling like you're betraying yourself. That's real closure." He was right. The conversation with Helen had provided the final piece I'd needed, confirmation that I'd made the right choice even though it had cost me significantly at the time. More importantly, it had revealed how completely I'd moved beyond needing anything from Tori or her family, not their understanding, not their approval, not even their apology, though Helen's had been meaningful in its sincerity. August brought the opportunity to showcase our post-acquisition success publicly. The parent company was hosting a major user conference, inviting customers and industry leaders to see product demonstrations and hear about strategic direction. Nathan and I were asked to present together about the integration success and what customers could expect from the expanded platform. The conference was being held in San Francisco, at a massive convention center that would host thousands of attendees. The presentation was scheduled for the main stage on the conference's second day, a prime slot that indicated how much the parent company valued the Streamline acquisition story. We spent weeks refining the content, crafting a narrative that highlighted innovation and customer benefit rather than just corporate congratulations. The goal was to excite the audience about possibilities rather than simply inform them about what had happened. The morning of our presentation, standing backstage while another speaker finished their session, I felt a familiar nervous energy that had nothing to do with doubt and everything to do with caring about the outcome. Nathan sensed it, reaching over to squeeze my hand briefly. "Remember that coffee shop where we met?" he said quietly. "You were eavesdropping on my terrible phone interview and had the courage to interrupt a stranger to offer your skills. If you could do that when you were starting from zero, you can definitely handle this stage." His reminder grounded me, connecting this moment to that origin point when I'd had nothing but competence and determination. We walked onto the stage together as our introduction finished, looking out at a sea of faces filling the massive conference hall. The presentation began with Nathan explaining the product vision, then transitioned to me detailing how we positioned it for market success, then back to him for technical demonstrations, the rhythm we perfected through numerous iterations. The audience response exceeded expectations. People were engaged, asking smart questions during the Q&A section, approaching us afterward with specific interest in implementing the solutions we described. Conference attendees stopped us throughout the rest of the event to continue conversations or simply express appreciation for the content. The parent company executives were thrilled, seeing validation that the acquisition had been strategically sound. During the conference's closing reception, I found myself in conversation with a group of senior marketing leaders from various companies, discussing career trajectories and lessons learned. One woman, a CMO from a well-funded startup, asked me directly about my background and how I'd reached my current position relatively young. I gave her the abbreviated version, focusing on taking risks and building from zero at Streamline, leaving out the personal drama that had precipitated my Denver move. But there must have been a catalyst, she pressed gently. Most people don't just randomly decide to move cities and start over. What was your moment of decision? I hesitated, then decided honesty would serve better than sanitized corporate storytelling. I discovered something about someone close to me that required I tell a difficult truth to someone else. The fallout cost me nearly all my social connections in my previous city. Moving to Denver was partly escape and partly recognition that I needed to rebuild somewhere I wouldn't be defined by other people's versions of events. The group was quiet for a moment, then another woman spoke up. Something similar happened to me early in my career. I reported financial irregularities that turned out to involve my mentor. He was fired, and I was technically protected but practically blacklisted by the network he'd built. I moved to a new industry entirely. Best decision I ever made, even though it was brutal at the time. Others in the group shared similar stories, moments when doing what they believed was right had come with significant professional or personal costs, but ultimately led them to better situations than what they'd left behind. The conversation shifted into discussing integrity in business contexts, how to navigate ethical dilemmas when the right choice wasn't the easy one, and the long-term benefits of building reputations based on trustworthiness even when it was inconvenient. I left that conversation feeling part of a community I hadn't known existed, people who'd faced similar crossroads and chosen similarly difficult paths. The flight back to Denver the next day gave Nathan and me time to decompress from the conference intensity. We'd both collected numerous business cards and follow-up commitments, connections that would likely turn into partnerships or opportunities. The success felt validating but also slightly surreal, a stark contrast to where I'd been just 3 years earlier when arriving in this city with nothing but determination and dwindling savings. "You've been quiet," Nathan observed as we drove home from the airport. "Processing everything or just exhausted?" "Both," I admitted. "I keep thinking about how different my life would be if I'd made different choices back in Austin. If I'd stayed quiet about what I found in those messages, maintained my friendship with Tori, kept my social circle intact. On paper, that would have been easier. But I'd be complicit in something I knew was wrong, and I'd never have met you or built any of this. Do you ever regret it? The cost of telling the truth?" I considered the question seriously rather than rushing to the expected answer. "Not regret exactly, but I do grieve sometimes for the friendship I thought I had before discovering it was built on a version of Tori that didn't actually exist. I grieve for my younger self who believed loyalty meant protecting people even from consequences of their own choices. But regret? No. I'd make the same choice again, even knowing what it would cost." Nathan reached over to take my hand, a gesture of solidarity rather than comfort. "That's the difference between people with integrity and people who just perform integrity. You were willing to pay the actual price rather than just claim you'd be willing to in hypothetical situations." September arrived with the kind of perfect weather that made Colorado feel like nature's reward for surviving the summer heat and winter cold. Nathan and I had settled into comfortable patterns in our new house, establishing rhythms and routines that reflected our combined preferences. Weekend mornings involved farmers' market visits and long breakfasts on our back deck. Evenings were for cooking together and discussing our days, maintaining the communication habits that had served us well through various transitions. Work continued demanding but felt sustainable in ways the startup intensity never had. My team was functioning smoothly, executing campaigns that drove measurable results without requiring my constant intervention. Nathan's product development had reached a stage where the core platform was stable and improvements were iterative rather than foundational. We'd both reached a professional place where we could be strategic rather than constantly reactive, focusing on direction rather than daily firefighting. The possibility of starting a family had been circling our conversations with increasing frequency. Neither of us felt urgent about it, but we'd reached a point of stability and partnership where adding that dimension felt natural rather than frightening. We'd started the preliminary discussions about timing and logistics, what parenting might look like given our careers, how we'd want to structure our lives to accommodate that additional responsibility. One evening in late September, as we were cleaning up after dinner, Nathan brought up something he'd clearly been considering for a while. I'd been thinking about the conference presentation we did, and how it felt to tell our story to that audience. It made me realize we've built something genuinely valuable, not just in business terms but in terms of the model we represent. A partnership based on mutual respect and complementary skills rather than competition or hierarchy. I paused in loading the dishwasher, sensing he was building towards something specific. Where are you going with this? I want us to consider doing some speaking or mentoring focused specifically on professional partnerships, how to build them, maintain them, let them evolve. He leaned against the counter, his expression thoughtful. We figured this out somewhat accidentally, but I think the principles are replicable. And there are probably a lot of people who could benefit from seeing a working example of what equitable partnership looks like in practice. The idea resonated immediately. We'd stumbled into a partnership model that worked exceptionally well, learning through trial and experience what many people never figured out. Sharing those lessons felt like a natural extension of the journey we'd been on. Over the following weeks, we developed the concept more fully, outlining key principles we discovered, common pitfalls we'd navigated, and practical frameworks for building sustainable professional partnerships. Our first opportunity to present this content came through a leadership conference focused on collaborative business models. The session we proposed, titled Building Partnerships That Scale, was accepted for a prime afternoon slot. We crafted the presentation carefully, balancing personal story with actionable insights, using our own journey as illustration rather than the entire focus. The goal was to provide genuine value to attendees rather than simply telling our story. The session attracted a standing room-only crowd, apparently hitting on a topic people were hungry to discuss. We presented our framework for partnership development, emphasizing key elements like complementary skills, clear communication, mutual respect, and willingness to evolve roles as circumstances changed. During the Q&A section, questions revealed how many people were struggling in partnerships that felt unbalanced or unsustainable, looking for models that might help them restructure or understand what was missing. One question in particular stood out, asked by a woman probably in her 40s who identified herself as a co-founder of a growing company. How do you handle moments when your personal relationship conflicts with business decisions? When what's right for the relationship isn't necessarily right for the company or vice versa? Nathan and I exchanged a glance, then I answered. We've been fortunate that our personal and professional values align closely, which minimizes direct conflicts. But when tensions do arise, we've learned to separate the conversations. We discuss business decisions using business criteria during work hours, then process any emotional responses to those decisions separately, at home, where we can be vulnerable without worrying about professional implications. Nathan added his perspective. The key for us has been remembering that we're partners in both contexts, which means neither relationship is disposable. If a business decision would genuinely damage our marriage, we don't make that decision. And if our marriage needs something that creates professional complications, we figure out how to accommodate that. The partnership itself is the foundation both relationships are built on. The conference session generated significant interest, with multiple attendees reaching out afterward about speaking at their own organizations or conferences. We accepted several of these opportunities over the following months, refining our content with each presentation and learning from the questions and discussions that emerged. The speaking engagements became an unexpected but rewarding dimension of our professional lives, allowing us to contribute to others' success in ways that felt meaningful. October arrived with the approaching anniversary of the Austin conference where I presented successfully and encountered Tori briefly. A year had passed since that moment of closure, and I found myself reflecting on how much had changed in that relatively short time. The acquisition had been completed and integrated successfully. Nathan and I had bought a house and deepened our marriage. We'd begun speaking and mentoring around partnership models. Life had continued evolving in positive directions, building on foundations we'd established deliberately. I was in my office reviewing analytics reports when my assistant informed me that someone named Rachel Kim was on the line, asking to speak with me. The name triggered immediate recognition, though I hadn't heard from Rachel in over 3 years. She'd been part of my Austin social circle, someone who'd sided with Tori after the wedding cancellation drama and stopped returning my calls. Whatever prompted her to reach out now, it clearly required significant motivation to overcome years of silence. I debated briefly whether to take the call, then decided curiosity outweighed caution. Rachel's voice when I answered was tentative, clearly uncertain of her reception. "Lauren, thank you for taking my call. I wasn't sure you would." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I'm calling because I owe you an apology, though I'm aware it comes far too late to undo any damage. When everything happened with Tori and Derek, I believed her version of events completely. I cut you off without ever asking for your side of the story. That was wrong, and I've regretted it increasingly as time has passed and I've learned more about what actually happened." She explained that she'd recently reconnected with Derek, who was now engaged and apparently willing to discuss the past more openly. His version of events, including the actual content of the messages I'd discovered in Tori's admitted plans, had forced Rachel to reconsider everything she believed about the situation. She'd done her own investigation after that conversation, talking to others who'd been involved, and gradually pieced together a more accurate picture. "I've spent 3 years thinking you betrayed your best friend out of jealousy or spite," Rachel said, her voice heavy with regret. "Now I understand you were trying to prevent someone from being manipulated into a false marriage. You chose integrity over social approval, and I punished you for it because I didn't bother to get the full story. I'm deeply sorry for that failure of friendship on my part." Her apology was sincere and I accepted it with grace, though I made clear that I wasn't interested in resuming the friendship we'd once had. Too much time had passed, and I'd built a life in Denver that didn't include my Austin past. Rachel understood, expressing gratitude that I'd at least heard her out and accepted her apology. We ended the call cordially but with clear understanding that this was closure rather than reconnection. The apologies from Helen and now Rachel represented a kind of vindication I'd stopped needing but appreciated nonetheless. They confirmed what I'd always known, that I'd made the right choice even though the immediate consequences had been painful. More importantly, they demonstrated that truth eventually surfaces regardless of how effectively people try to bury or spin it. Tori's carefully constructed narrative had eventually collapsed under the weight of its own contradictions, leaving those who'd believed it to reconsider their judgments. November brought preparations for the New Zealand honeymoon we'd been planning for months. Work had reached a point where both Nathan and I could take 3 weeks away without crisis, trusting our respective teams to handle normal operations. We'd mapped an itinerary that balanced adventure with relaxation, hiking and exploration combined with downtime to simply enjoy being together without the constant pull of professional responsibilities. The trip itself exceeded expectations, providing the kind of reset that only comes from complete disconnection from normal routines. We hiked through stunning landscapes, explored charming small towns, ate remarkable food, and spent long evenings talking about our future without the distraction of immediate work concerns. One conversation in particular, over wine at a vineyard overlooking rolling hills, centered on what we wanted the next chapter of our lives to look like. "I think I'm ready to start a family," Nathan said, voicing what we'd both been circling around. "Not immediately, but soon. I want to build that part of our life together, see what kind of parents we'll be, create something beyond our professional partnership." I agreed, feeling the rightness of the timing. We'd built strong professional foundations, our marriage was solid and tested through various challenges, and we'd reached a maturity that felt appropriate for taking on parenting responsibilities. The conversation shifted to logistics and timing, practical details that needed consideration, but the fundamental decision felt clear and mutual. We returned to Denver refreshed and aligned, ready to begin actively trying to conceive while continuing our professional work. The following months brought the peculiar combination of patience and anticipation that characterizes that process, maintaining normal life while watching for signs that it had changed fundamentally. Work continued demanding our attention, speaking engagements filled several weekends, and life proceeded with its usual complexity. The pregnancy test showed positive on a February morning, nearly 4 years after I'd first arrived in Denver, heartbroken and uncertain. Nathan and I sat together on our bathroom floor, staring at the result and processing the reality that our partnership was about to expand in the most profound way possible. The joy was immediate and overwhelming, tempered only slightly by the awareness of how much would change and how much we'd need to learn. The pregnancy progressed normally through spring, bringing both the expected physical changes and unexpected emotional revelations. I found myself reflecting frequently on my own childhood, my relationship with my mother, and what I wanted to do similarly or differently as a parent. Nathan engaged in similar processing, working through his complicated feelings about his father and the expectations that had characterized his own upbringing. We talked through these reflections together, using them to clarify our own parenting values and approaches. My brother Marcus and his wife were thrilled about becoming aunt and uncle, already planning visits and offering advice from their own parenting experience. Nathan's relationship with his father remained distant, though he did call to share the pregnancy news, receiving congratulations that felt genuine if somewhat formal. The response from our professional circles was universally positive, with colleagues and clients expressing support and several offering advice from their own experiences balancing careers and parenthood. By summer, as my due date approached, I found myself taking stock of the journey that had led to this moment. For years earlier, I'd driven into Denver with nothing but possessions crammed in my car and determination to rebuild. I'd been running from humiliation and betrayal, uncertain whether I could actually create something meaningful from such a painful starting point. Now I had a career I was proud of, a marriage built on genuine partnership, a home I loved, and a child arriving soon. The contrast was so stark it almost felt like two different people's lives. Nathan found me one evening standing in the completed nursery, surrounded by furniture we'd assembled and decorations we'd chosen together. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his hands on my very pregnant belly. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. How none of this would exist if I'd made different choices 4 years ago. If I'd stayed quiet about what I found, maintained my friendship with Tori, avoided the fallout, I'd probably still be in Austin, maybe married to someone I didn't truly partner with, definitely not here with you, not building this life. Do you think you'd be happy in that version? I considered honestly rather than rushing to the expected answer. Maybe I'd have convinced myself I was happy because I wouldn't have known what I was missing. But it would have been a smaller life, defined by what was comfortable rather than what was true. I'm grateful, in a strange way, for what happened. Not for the betrayal itself, but for how it forced me to become someone stronger and more authentic. Our daughter arrived in late August during a thunderstorm that seemed appropriately dramatic for such a momentous occasion. The labor was long and difficult, testing both of us in ways we hadn't anticipated, but holding our baby for the first time made every moment of struggle feel worthwhile. We named her Claire, a name that meant clear and bright, reflecting our hope for her future. The early weeks of parenthood brought exhaustion and adjustment as we learned to care for this tiny human who depended entirely on us. My maternity leave allowed me to focus completely on Claire and recovery, while Nathan arranged his schedule to work from home as much as possible. We fumbled through sleepless nights and endless diaper changes, gradually developing routines and confidence in our ability to meet her needs. Claire was 2 months old when I received an unexpected email through my professional contact form. The sender was Tori, writing from a new email address I didn't recognize. The message was brief and carefully worded, acknowledging that she had no right to contact me but asking if I'd be willing to meet for coffee if I was ever in the Austin area. She'd heard through mutual acquaintances about my success, my marriage, and now the birth of my daughter. She wanted to apologize in person if I'd allow it, not to ask for forgiveness but to acknowledge the damage she'd caused. I showed the email to Nathan, unsure how I felt about it. Part of me wanted to ignore it entirely, maintaining the boundaries I'd established. But another part recognized that this might provide true closure, an opportunity to face each other as adults rather than the people we'd been during that painful chapter. "What do you want to do?" Nathan asked, his tone carefully neutral to avoid influencing my decision. "I think I want to meet her," I said slowly, surprising myself. Not because I need her apology or want to resume any kind of relationship, but because I'm curious about who she is now. Whether she's learned anything or grown at all. And maybe because I want her to see that I'm genuinely happy, not just professionally successful but personally fulfilled. We discussed it further over the following days, examining my motivations and ensuring this was about closure rather than reopening wounds. Eventually I responded to Tori's email, agreeing to meet during a trip Nathan and I were planning to Austin for a speaking engagement the following month. I'd bring Claire with me, letting Tori see the complete picture of the life I'd built. The coffee shop Tori suggested was neutral territory, a place neither of us had frequented during my Austin years. I arrived with Claire in her carrier, finding Tori already seated at a corner table. She looked up as I approached and the change in her was immediately visible. The confidence and certainty that had characterized her before had been replaced by something more tentative and worn. She was still put together, still recognizably Tori, but diminished in ways that went beyond simple aging. "Lauren, thank you for agreeing to meet." Her voice was quiet, lacking the commanding tone I remembered. "And this must be Claire. She's beautiful." We ordered coffee, navigating initial awkwardness while Claire slept peacefully in her carrier between us. Then Tori began to speak, words that sounded rehearsed but sincere, acknowledging specific ways she'd wronged me, Derek, and ultimately herself. She'd been in therapy for over a year, working through why she'd felt the need to deceive everyone rather than living authentically. The realizations had been painful, forcing her to confront her own cowardice and the damages it had caused. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said carefully. "I'm not even sure I've forgiven myself. But I needed you to hear directly from me that I was wrong. About everything. Wrong to manipulate Derek, wrong to betray your friendship, wrong to paint you as the villain when you were trying to prevent real harm. You showed more courage and integrity in one difficult choice than I showed in years of carefully constructed lies." Her apology was comprehensive and seemingly genuine, addressing specific injuries rather than offering vague regrets. I listened without interrupting, letting her complete what she'd clearly prepared to say. When she finished, silence stretched between us while I considered my response. "I appreciate you saying all of that," I finally replied. "It helps to hear you acknowledge what actually happened rather than the version you told everyone at the time. But I want you to understand something important. I didn't agree to this meeting because I need your apology to move forward. I moved forward 3 years ago when I left Austin. This meeting is about allowing you closure, not providing it for myself." Tori nodded, accepting the distinction. "I understand. Can I ask you something though? Do you ever wonder how things would have been different if I'd just been honest from the beginning? If I'd had the courage to tell Derek I wasn't actually in love with him, to come out to my family, to build a real relationship with Cassidy instead of hiding it? I've thought about it," I admitted. "But ultimately, those were your choices to make. I can't know what would have happened if you'd chosen differently. What I do know is that the path you did choose hurt people unnecessarily, including yourself. Derek is happy now with someone who genuinely wants to marry him. I built a life I love. Even Cassidy presumably learned something from how that relationship ended. The only person still suffering from your choices seems to be you." The observation landed heavily, but Tori didn't deny it. She shared briefly about her current situation, the corporate job she found unfulfilling, the therapy that was helping but painful, the slow process of rebuilding a life based on authenticity rather than performance. She'd started coming out to family and friends, facing the reactions she'd feared for years. Some had been supportive, others judgmental, but all of it was at least honest. We talked for another hour, not as friends but as two people who'd once been close and had moved in very different directions. Tori asked about my work, my marriage, motherhood. I answered honestly but maintained appropriate boundaries, sharing information without inviting intimacy. When Claire woke hungry, I used it as a natural endpoint for the meeting. As we prepared to leave, Tori reached across the table briefly. "I'm genuinely happy for you, Lauren. You deserved all of this, the success and the partnership and the family. I'm sorry I couldn't see that before, couldn't be the friend you deserved. I hope you find what you're looking for," I replied sincerely. "Real happiness, not the performance of it. You're capable of that if you stay committed to the work you're doing." We parted with a brief hug that felt more like farewell than reconnection. Walking back to my car with Claire, I felt the finality of that closure. Tori and I would likely never speak again, and that was appropriate. We'd been friends during a chapter of life that had ended, and who we'd become afterward was too different to bridge that gap. But the meeting had served its purpose, allowing both of us to acknowledge what had happened and move forward without lingering resentment or unresolved questions. Nathan was waiting at our hotel when I returned, immediately reading my expression. "How did it go?" "Exactly how it needed to," I told him, setting Claire's carrier down carefully. She apologized sincerely. I accepted it without offering reconciliation. We both got closure. Now it's truly finished. That evening, as we prepared for our speaking engagement the next day, I reflected on the journey that meeting represented. For years ago, Tori's betrayal had felt like the end of my world. Now it felt like ancient history, something that had happened to a younger version of myself who'd been transformed by surviving it. The woman I'd become, the life I'd built, the family I was raising, all of it had emerged from that painful catalyst. Our speaking engagement the next day went exceptionally well, the audience responding enthusiastically to our framework for building sustainable partnerships. During the Q&A, someone asked how we maintained partnership equality when life circumstances changed dramatically, such as during pregnancy or early parenthood. Nathan and I answered collaboratively, sharing how we'd navigated my recent maternity leave and his schedule adjustments, emphasizing that partnership meant adapting to changing needs rather than maintaining rigid equality at all times. After the session, a young woman approached me privately. She explained that she'd discovered something similar to what I had years ago, evidence of a friend's significant deception that would hurt others if left unaddressed. She was terrified of the consequences of speaking up but also couldn't live with staying silent. She'd somehow learned my story through professional networks and wanted advice on navigating that impossible position. I shared my experience honestly, acknowledging both the costs and the ultimate rightness of choosing truth over convenience. I told her that integrity sometimes requires accepting painful consequences, but that living with compromised integrity is ultimately more damaging than any social fallout. I couldn't tell her what to do, but I could affirm that doing the right thing, even when it's hard, allows you to build a life on solid foundations rather than convenient lies. She thanked me with tears in her eyes, clearly still uncertain but perhaps slightly more confident in her own moral compass. Watching her walk away, I recognized my younger self in her fear and determination. I hoped her journey would be less painful than mine had been, but I knew that regardless of the specific costs, choosing integrity would ultimately serve her better than choosing comfort. The flight back to Denver felt like a true completion. I'd returned to Austin not as someone seeking validation or nursing wounds, but as someone whole and content. I'd faced Tori with compassion rather than anger, offered my story to someone who needed it, and demonstrated through my professional work that success built on authentic partnership was possible and replicable. Most importantly, I'd done all of it while holding my daughter, a living representation of the life I'd built from the ashes of that earlier devastation. As our plane descended into Denver with the Rocky Mountains visible in the distance, Nathan reached over to take my hand. Claire dozed against my chest in her carrier, blissfully unaware of the journey her parents had taken to arrive at this moment. I looked at my husband and daughter, thought about our home and work and community, and felt profound gratitude for every choice that had led here, even the painful ones. The betrayal I'd discovered in those Instagram DMs 4 years ago had felt like the worst thing that could happen to me. It had cost me a best friend, a social circle, and a home city I'd loved. But it had also freed me to become someone stronger, to build something genuine, to find partnership based on mutual respect rather than convenient compatibility. Sometimes the worst moments of our lives are actually doorways to our greatest transformations, though we can never see it while we're walking through them. I'd driven into Denver 4 years ago carrying wounds I wasn't sure would heal. I was leaving Austin now with those wounds completely healed, replaced by the kind of strength that only comes from surviving what you thought would break you. The story that had begun with betrayal and heartbreak had transformed into one of resilience, integrity, and ultimately, peace. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.